All right, we kick off a new series called Practical Lessons for Living Life. And what I want to do is I want to spend the next 4 weeks, and I just kind of want to take some really practical things that we deal with in our life and things that affect us all the time, and let's take just a really in-depth look at what kind of life looks like if we live our life the way Christ called us to live it. And we're going to start out today with, you guessed it, time, because that's what you just saw a video on. And here's what I got to say about that. Probably about 3 weeks ago, we sometimes we have these infantile kind of wars inside of our office. We like, things get bored. Do you ever get bored in your office and things kind of go infantile after that? So we start wrapping up these little pieces of paper until they're like really, really thick, and then we bend them in half, and we take them when they're not looking and take a rubber band and we shoot it at somebody. It's called a wasp, and if you hit them just right, it kind of, Natalie's like, I used to work there. I know exactly what you're talking about. But it puts a little mark on somebody's skin. It's kind of funny. You laugh, and then they get you back, and that's the way it works. And I would want to get Sean so bad. So I would pull that rubber band as hard as I could, and it never failed. Every time I went to get him, right before I would shoot it, it would go pop, and it would just break in my hand. And I started thinking about that on a spiritual level, and here's what I came up with, and what I really kind of just thought made so much sense. It was the tension. I was trying to get the max out of the rubber band, as much as I could possibly get out of it, and if I would take it so far, it would just break, and I wouldn't accomplish anything. I wouldn't get him, he'd put another red mark on me, and I'd be behind the game 2-0. You know what I'm saying? And so that is kind of spiritually what happens in our life sometimes. Our life is a rubber band, and we stretch it as far as we possibly can. We try to fit everything we can into our 24-hour day. We stretch and we pull and we get that thing so thin, and then all of a sudden, pop. And when it pops, everything comes crashing down, doesn't it? It came crashing down for my wife and I in about the year 2004, 2003. I was a youth pastor in a town called Raytown, Missouri. And it was a really hard job. 4 guys had been fired before me, and I was determined I was not going to be the guy that got fired next. I was working 7 o'clock in the morning to 7:30 at night. We were trying to reach every kid we possibly could. We were having Friday night events, and like 1,000 kids were showing up. And no matter how many kids showed up, what ended up happening was I couldn't play the political game. And January comes around. My boss calls me in the office, and I'm number 5. She sits me down, and she goes, Matt, I just think we need to look in another direction. And I remember going home, and I remember opening the door to our split-level house and walking into the main level in the living room and looking at the time at my 4 to 6 month old little boy, Jonah, who I really hadn't shared in the diaper changing. I really hadn't shared in the putting him to bed because I was working. I didn't really get to see him when he woke up because I was gone. And I went, oh my gosh, he's 6 months old. I don't know him. And it freaked me out. I realized I was pulling the rubber band at every angle. I was pulling it as thin as I could possibly pull it. I was trying to get the maximum expendability out of this rubber band, and it had broken. My life had kind of came crashing down on me, and even the things that were most important to me, I hadn't given the time and the investment in, and so I didn't really know them. And I realized right there in that moment that I would never, ever, ever do that again. It was then. I was like, never again will I sacrifice my family on the altar of ministry. To this day, I'll talk about this later, but I don't do it today. And it all comes back to that moment when I lost that job. And I'll never forget, here's what ends up happening, is that moment when the rubber band breaks, everything kind of goes crazy. Let me give you an example for a second. Steve, if you'll come up here and watch that thing. It's got a hole in it somehow, and I don't want it to explode over everything, so the hole's right there. I think mice got to it. Either that or Dale. He was sitting on the front. Anyway. Just kidding, Dale. Kind of hold that up as high as you possibly can. There you go. Yeah, keep going. Keep going. There you go. Is that bad?
Did Betsy do this?
So here's kind of what happens if you get weaker and you got to bring it down a little bit. It's okay. But here's kind of what we do in our wives and our spouses and our children's lives. You see, we go out and we chase success. And we chase these time crunchers. And what ends up happening is we go, honey, I know you're busy right now, but if you'll just hold that, there's going to be a day when things get better. There's going to be a day when things get different. And I just want you to know that it's going to be all right. And we go and we make these promises, and we make these promises, and we make these promises, and it's heavy, isn't it?
It's getting there.
Yeah. And so you watch as your wife kind of, or your spouse, or your children, they kind of go, okay, I can handle this. And you're trying hard, but man, it's starting to strain right in there a little bit. And you're going, man, this is tough. And this is about the moment when your spouse snaps on you. Has that ever happened? Because what ends up happening is they go, and you're like, whoa, what just came out of you, man? You like got Beelzebub living up inside of you. In our house, I had lost my job, and here's what happened, okay? We were moving away, and I wanted as much stuff as I could possibly get in the car. And my wife had been holding that bag over her head for so long while I said, hey, we got so many kids coming. God's doing so many great things. Just don't give up. Just kind of hang in there. My wife knew nobody at that church. She stayed at home, and she nursed babies, and she did, is it getting really heavy? Okay, so here's what would happen. Is stand over here because they got to see you in the back. There you go. So, hi, service. So anyway, if you got to bring it down a little bit, it's okay. But so here's what happened. It was so bad. We went back to Kansas City last year. My wife didn't even remember like land points that we used to go to because it was just like a hard time in our life. I'm packing everything in the car as tight as we can get it. Our kids are like sardines because I never want to go back. I had my rubber band break. I want it gone. And my wife snaps. And when that happens, it's like they take the bag and they just can't hold it anymore and it just drops. Ever been here? And then with that moment, my wife starts pulling everything out of the car and chucking it all over the yard as far as she can possibly fit. I don't even want this crud anyway. And she's just chucking it all over the place. And I'm going, who are you and what'd you do with my wife? And it simply came from, okay, that for so long I had asked her to hold that bag over her head and she just couldn't do it anymore. The rubber band broke. Not just for me, the rubber band broke for her. And it wasn't too long after that I read a book called Choosing to Cheat. And here's the concept of it, okay? You have 24 hours in your day, 6 to 8 of which that you're going to sleep. And the other 16 to 18, depending on how much you need sleep, you are going to cheat something. You're going to cheat your kids. You're going to cheat your spouse. You're going to cheat your job. You're going to cheat God. You're going to cheat something in order to give something else your time. Because let's be honest with ourselves. There are so many hours in a day. And if we don't tackle this time issue, then I can just tell you, your family is a ticking time bomb. Your wife or your spouse or your children are holding this bag. You're probably making promises to them that it's going to get different. And it's not going to get different unless you make some intentional choices to change. Okay? Choices like I had to make. And let me say this. It's not choices I just had to make in 2003 and 2004. It's choices I'm making today. What is the best for my family? I'm constantly asking that question. And God's going to ask us that question through Scripture. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. If you got your Bibles, do me a favor. Yeah, you can give them a hand. How's your arms feel? You kind of weak?
Not bad.
Okay. Aren't you glad I didn't ask you? Yeah, would you? That'd be awesome, because you know me. I'll be like at your feet, face first. It'll be an awkward moment. All right, so here's what it says. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15 through 17, here's what it says. Look carefully, then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise people, okay? Look carefully, then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise people, making the best use of your time because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of God is. Let's start at the very, very top. What's the very first thing he says? Look carefully then how you walk. Okay? We have this idea in our life that more is better, right? If we can have a bigger this or a better that or a shinier this, or if we could do this, or if only we could accomplish this. And we don't even think about what we allow to enter into our inner life. And so we grab things and we just put them in who we are and we just keep adding and adding. Can anybody understand and relate to this? That is me. And I just keep adding things and adding things. And what God is saying is you need to stop and you need to take a careful look at how you live your life. You need to take inventory on what is walking in the door and what is going out the door and what is being neglected. We have this thing that I talked about a couple weeks ago, and I call it the cultural crazy train. And it's what everybody wants to jump on. And what is the cultural crazy train? Say for someone that is in a church that's our age. Here's what it says, okay? It says you need a nice house. You know, if you could have a 4-bedroom house, that'd be awesome. And you need some land. And you need a car, and it should be shiny, black with tan or black with black leather. It doesn't matter. I mean, you need to get a nice car. And on top of that, your kids need to be great at sports. I mean, if they're great at travel ball, that's especially good. And you need to have your own hobbies. You need to be really good at softball. So you need to be up at Casey Hall practicing as much as you can to hit the ball as far as you can. And we have all these things that we add in our life, right? And there are all these equations, and here's what happens. When we jump the cultural crazy train, and let me stop here for just a second and just kind of make this preface right here. Sometimes the crazy train stuff isn't bad when it's in control, but out of control, it's terribly bad. And it's not just bad stuff like more houses or more cars. Sometimes we spend too much time at church, let's just be honest. We should be home hanging out with our kids, and we're swamped here. Some of us, man, we have missions that we're out there in the community doing, and we have enveloped ourselves with it, and we've dived into it, but at what cost at home? At what cost to our children? At what cost to our spouse? Let me ask you a question. When was the last time you found yourself overwhelmed and busy? And when you were overwhelmed and busy, when was the last time you stepped back and you said, I need to take inventory of my life? Has there ever been a moment when you stopped and took inventory of your life? Or do you just jump that cultural crazy train all the time? Can I tell you something about the cultural crazy train? It's very easy to hop on and get a ticket. It's very tough to jump off. There is no stopping points. It just keeps going and absorbing more and more and more and more people. So what he says is this. He says, look carefully then how you walk. Don't jump the cultural crazy train. Instead of walking unwise, you need to walk wisely. What's the difference between a wise person and an unwise person? An unwise person goes, okay, yeah, absolutely. You want me to do that? Okay. And we find ourselves sometimes doing that, right? Because we want to please people. Because we want to feel good about ourselves, because what we're saying okay to gives us pleasure, even though it's maybe not a great idea in the grand scheme, so we go, okay. But a wise person looks at the situation, they take inventory of it, they go, man, that crazy train has me enveloped right now. I don't have time for my spouse, I don't have time for my kids. I'm asking her to hold so much stuff, I'm going to step back, and I'm going to be wise, and I'm going to step off, because nobody will ask you to get off the cultural crazy train. Only you can do that. How do we know if we're walking wisely or if we walk unwisely? How do we know if we have too much stuff going on in our life? How do we know? How do we keep up with what's culturally okay and what's culturally not okay? Because here's the reality. Sometimes in our life, there are seasons when it's okay to be busy, right? It's okay to be caught up in something. It's okay to have a busy time at work where you have to travel a little bit. But here's the difference. You ready? The difference is this. You have to ask yourself some questions if you think you might be riding the cultural crazy train. Do you make promises all the time that it's going to get better, just give it some time? To your friends, to your spouse, to your children. Man, baby, just give me a couple months. It's going to get better, I promise you. There's just a season, but the season never changes. Ever been there? Do you look at your kids? Do you look at your spouse and you go, I promise it's going to get different. We just need some time. We got to get some ducks in order. We got to make some adjustments, but I promise you it's going to get better. It's not going to stay this way forever. This is just a time. The future is going to, and you start making promises about the future. Do you find yourself breaking promises a lot? Oh, honey, I know what I told you I was going to do that, but we had this jump in and this jump in and this jump in. If you say yes to those things, there's a great chance that your time is managed by somebody other than you. You're stuck on the cultural crazy train, and you need to step back, and the Bible says you need to take inventory of your life and adjust based on being a wise person and not an unwise person. Okay? Bible goes on to say, let's read it together. Ephesians 5, 15 through 17, here's what it says. Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of your time. Woo! Now that's a statement right there. Because I can make a lot of use of my time, right? I can do a lot of things with my time that makes a whole lot of sense. I can go out, for example, and I can be really good at golf, but it may not be the best use of my time. But here's the problem with time. You ready? Sometimes it is hard to quantify what is wise and what is unwise, because in our life, especially as men, and maybe not so much as women, but especially as men who are leading the homes, most of us, here's what you got to understand, okay? We will go out and we will fill ourselves with things we can quantify. And there's some women that do this as well, so I'm not want to make it just a man thing. It's a man and woman thing. But we'll go out and we'll go, I will get the job, and I will spend a lot of time at the job because the job will tell me what I do well. The job will give me statistics that I can quantify. The job will give me a paycheck that I can come home and show my wife of how successful I am. The job has people there that tell me how good I am at what I do. When I come home, there's nothing quantifiable. I mean, I'm wiping a butt. I'm wiping a mouth. I'm taking puke off my shirt. I'm cleaning up rooms. I'm doing laundry. There's nothing quantifiable about this. That's why women sometimes get so lost in their home, because their husband's out trying to quantify himself and they are trying to quantify themselves, but it's so hard to quantify yourself at home. But here's what we don't understand, okay? And here's what we miss. God didn't say go out and maximize your time. He said make the best use of your time, okay? So as I sit in my house and I wipe those tails and I clean off that puke and I do that laundry and I sit with my kids and I play the 1,000th game of Around the World at the basketball goal and I do all those things that they want to do, and I play catch and we play video games and we hang out and we talk and we wrestle. Those are things that over time have this lifetime effect that you can't quantify in a moment. And because we can't quantify it in a moment, what do? We go find the place where we can do things that will quantify us in a moment. What I want to challenge you to do as a church, what I want to challenge myself to do as a church, is step back and take a look and say, it isn't about my job. It is not about my success. It's about that when I I lay in my casket at the end of my life and my family is around me, what will they say about me? Man, he taught me to be a godly man. Man, I remember the time we had the sex talk. Man, I remember the time that we went on that camping trip and we sat and we just talked for hours, and he told me how to live my life financially. And it's all those little moments that add into one big moment that you can't quantify in a second, but you can only quantify over years. So how do I do that, Matt? How do I do that? Here's how you do that. Here's how you make the best use of your time. Is you begin to cheat the things that don't really matter. Now, let me say this up ahead. When I say you choose to cheat, it doesn't mean you go to work and you do less of a job because you got to go home and take care of your kids. That's a lie, right? But you learn to manage your time in such a way that your kids, your wife, that the people that matter, they don't take a second seat anymore. I work just as hard at this church, probably harder than I ever worked at Raytown. I'm just smarter about it. I figure out times. I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to study because I want to be up when they're not up, because I know when they're up, they need me. I come home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon sometime, and you come by my house, you'll see me playing catch. You know why? Because I'm probably going to be out at 8 o'clock that night, and I want to make sure that we play catch together and we have time together and we spend those crucial moments. And some of you are going, man, you don't know my life. You don't know how crazy it is. Here's what I'm here to tell you, okay? That has to either be a season or something that's coming to a close. Because if it's not coming to a close, what are you going to accomplish? Just because you made a lot of money, just because you had a nice house. Look at it this way. If you work your tail off to make $50,000 so you can send your kid to school, but he's estranged from you and could care less who you are and has no goals and ambition in life because you failed to pour it into him, did you really do that much by raising $50,000? No. So we have to step back. We have to quantify. We have to make the best use of our time. And here's how we do it. Number one, is make your move. You need to make a move in your life of what you are going to do to have resolve in your life and to have a normal margin, right? A balance, a margin in your life that will help you. Now, let me say this, okay? Everyone is different. Not every wife needs her husband home as much as another wife. Some wives, they just want their husband home more. Some, they could care less if he ever comes home. You know what I'm saying? Right? Some children, they're at a stage in their life where they don't need mom and dad as much. Other children, they need dad. Oh man, they need him home and they need him home now. And a lot of times what do we find? That we have more time when they don't want us around because they're older and we have a little bit more money and we're more well established. But when they're younger and we're trying to prove ourselves, we're never home. We've got to change that paradigm. So we need to make a move, and here's how you make that move, and this is tough. You step back and you ask this question. Is what I'm doing stopping me from being the mom, the dad, the child, the family member that I need to be? And if it is, you either make an adjustment or you step out of it altogether. Whoo, what are you talking about? Leave my job? Dean McDonald was here the first hour. I've never been more proud of a man than 3 years ago when I met Dean. And he was working 90 hours a week, and I'm not exaggerating that. There was never a time Dean didn't have his phone on. There was never a time Dean was home. And Dean was so busy that it came to Easter. He told me I could share this with you. It came time for the Easter get-together over at First Baptist where his kids go to private school, and they were told you can invite 2 people. And they invited his mom and somebody else because they knew he wouldn't come. So they didn't even invite him. And it was that point it was like getting hit in the gut, Matt. And he walked in his office at an incredibly lucrative job. He looked his boss in the face and he said, I don't want this anymore. I can't continue to cheat my family and do this job. So I'm going to cheat you and I'm going to walk away. And he went and he took another job, making a great salary, not as much as he used to make, but man, he's at every baseball game. He's at every event. He's at everything that little boy and those 2 little girls are doing. And he is making the investment. That doesn't quantify, but over a series of years will leave a legacy. How about you? Have you made your move? Number 2, after you make your move, here's the second thing you have to do. Is I said this a couple weeks ago, I used this illustration, but remember I talked about Hernando Cortez, the guy who came over and he founded a part of Mexico, and he came in, and the story tells that in 1500s he came over, and why he was here, famine hit, the people were being attacked, they were dying, and they came to him, they said, man, Hernando, we got to leave. And he said, no, burn the ships. And they go, what are you talking about, burn the ships? We don't need firewood, burn the ships, he said. And they go, why would you want us to burn the ships? Because I don't ever want us to go back where we came from. We're here, and this is where we're at. And what has to happen in our life, if we're truly going to get off the cultural crazy train, is we have to step back. We have to decide what God says is the right things for us to do. We have to make our move in permanent stone, and then we need to burn the avenues that ever take us back to the life we used to have. And then we need to create new paths. You know, we were in the woods the other day, and it was a completely touched area, and there was no path. And I looked down, and there's poison ivy everywhere. At least I think it's poison ivy. Jeremy's laughing because he's like, it's not poison ivy. But I'm thinking, there's poison ivy here. There's going to be a snake somewhere. I don't like that kind of stuff. And I'm walking. I'm trying to create my own path. And until there's a path, you know how you walk, and all of a sudden you get a face full of spiders, and you're like, blah, 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 you know what I'm talking about? And I'm like, oh, I hate it when there's no path, right? And it's so hard to create a new path. But once that new path is created, it gives us clear lines of where to walk. When you make your move in how to cheat the right things, and you burn the old paths so that you're never going back, then it's going to be some work, but you have to pat down some new directions that you can go to begin to cheat the things that don't matter in order to give to the things that do. Let me tell you what that looks like in my own life. My son's baseball coach sat right over there where Jason Haler is sitting in the first service. I said this right in front of him. At the beginning of the year, I went to him and I said, Micah will never miss church because of a Sunday morning baseball game. He's just not going to do it. And he was really cool about it. He was like, okay, I understand. I'm just not going to make that concession. We burned that path a long time ago. Micah's baseball career in college will not matter or be based on the fact of whether he played every Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. It'll be based on how hard he worked and how much work he gave and how much he was committed to it. And guess what? When he honors God with his life, and I teach him to honor God with his life, God will bless his baseball career because he honored God first. But that's really hard to trust. That's a new path that has to be beaten down. And there's spider webs and there's snakes and there's poison ivy. And it's like, oh, I don't want to do that. But I'm here to tell you, when he grows up, you know what he'll do? He'll look at his son's baseball coach. And he'll say, he's not going to be there. And his son, and his son, and his son. Are you choosing to cheat the right things? Some of you guys, here's what needs to happen. You need to go into your work. You need to sit down with your boss and you go, hey, I love my job. I love what I'm doing. But I feel like I'm taken away from my family because I'm traveling all the time, or I'm gone, or I'm this, or I'm that. Can I move my schedule to the front side? I remember going to my boss when I was working at this church. It was crazy. I worked 38 days in a row without a day off, including Saturday and Sunday. I worked 7 in the morning to 9:30 at night sometimes. And I went to him and I go, look, can I come in earlier and leave earlier? And he said, yeah, man, come in at 6 o'clock. You can leave at 4 o'clock. I said, okay, that's fine. I'll do that. And he couldn't hold up to that. So you know what I did? I walked away. I didn't keep the job anymore because in 2004, when everything fell apart and I looked at my little boy and I did not know him, I swore I burned that path and I'll never go back. The final thing that it takes, and I think it's probably the most important thing because this is where we're all different. The last thing he says is this: look carefully then how you walk. Step back and assess your life. Not as an unwise person, but as a wise person. Make the best use of your time. Know which things to cheat and know which things to give your time to. Because the days are evil. The cultural crazy train is evil and it will grab you and not let you go. Therefore, don't be foolish, but understand the will of the Lord. The will of the Lord is different for all of us. I mean, you hang garage doors, I'm a pastor. You sell houses, I'm a pastor. You're a banker, I'm a pastor. You make pet supplies, you're an air traffic controller. I mean, everybody's got a different thing going on. Demands are different for every single one of us. And that means that God's plan for us is unique in every single household. And like I said earlier, everybody's needs are different. So the only way to make the right decision is you take your kids and you lay them on a piece of paper. Their names, not them. And then you take your spouse and you lay that down. And then you put a piece of paper in the middle, and this is all the things that we're involved in. And then you step back and you read, God, I want to walk carefully how I walk. Which one of these things will stop my son from being the godly man you want him to be? Which one of these things will cause me to love my wife less? Which one of these things will make me love you less? God, which one of these things am I sacrificing everything for and putting all the weight on the other person? Which of these things sound good, God? They sound so good, but they're so bad for me. Because I would venture to say there are some of you in this room that are involved in a lot of really, really good things. But it's not for a season, it's forever. And you've got yourself trapped on this cultural crazy train and you can't get off. And you need to make your move. You need to burn that path. You need to fire up a new path that leads straight to the will of God. I used to hear this statement all the time. The road of good intentions is paved to nowhere. Or the road to nowhere is paved with good intentions. You know, a lot of us, we have good intentions, don't we? Oh man, I promise you, if you'll just hang with me, I know this is a really busy time, but it's been a busy time for 6 years. I know, but it's gonna get better. and it doesn't get better. Oh man, I promise you we're going to go do that next week. Oh, I promise you, man, in the future, I'm going to give you so much more. Man, the future is like down the corner, and you're going to turn around and you're going to go, oh my gosh, my kids are grown and I've done all these things, and what did I accomplish? Unless you step back, make your move, burn your paths, blaze new ones. Some of you are sitting in here and you're going, you know what? This doesn't relate to me. I mean, I'm so past the time with kids. Well, here's what I find about people who are above our level in age. Here's what I find. I have so many of them that come up to me and go, man, I am more busy retired than I ever was when I worked. I go, why? Well, I've got this going on and this going on, and we're going here and we're doing this and we're doing this, and we're going, oh my goodness, I got this and this and that, and oh my, I'm just overwhelmed. You're retired. Slow down. You don't have to ride the cultural crazy train. You need to sit down and figure out what God's will is for the last half of your life. You need to say, hey, God, if I lived this exactly the way you wanted me to, what would disappear and what would remain? And whatever would remain, you need to keep it there. And don't move. Burn the paths to the old place. Blaze new ones to where God wants you to go. And it may be really good things that you need to get rid of. If it stops you from being with your family, spending time with your spouse, or loving God with your whole heart. Period. Will you do me a favor? Will you bow your head and close your eyes? Here's the simple invitation for you today. Don't even want you to raise your hand. I just simply want to ask you this question that only you can answer, and really only you need to answer to yourself. Are you riding the cultural crazy train? Is your wife, your spouse, your children, your family, are they holding the weight and you keep promising them that it's going to get better, but it's not getting better? Are you making promises to your kids that you're going to do so many things with them in the future, but the future never comes? Maybe it's time that you stepped back and right here in this moment just said, God, take my schedule. God, rewrite it. Burn the paths that take me to the cultural crazy train and blaze me new ones that lead me to you. Remember, the path of good intentions, or the path that leads to nowhere, is paved with good intentions. I'm here to tell you, good intentions aren't going to get this done. Action's going to get this done. Hard choices is going to get this done. And I bet if you're sitting here praying and this has you riddled right now, you already know the hard choice that needs to happen. So here's my question for you. Will you make the change? For the betterment of you, for your spouse, for your kids, for your legacy, for your relationship with God. Father, I just thank you for loving us. God, I thank you for the fact that, God, you aren't a God of guilt. You didn't sit us in here today to make us feel horrible. You set us in here today to make us realize and kind of take account of our life and take inventory. And God, to work out our salvation with fear and trembling, to look at who we are and make a decision of what do we want our life to say. God, I pray for those who are in this room who are just like right in the middle of that and going, man, he is talking straight to me. I just pray, God, that they wouldn't pave roads to nowhere with good intentions, but they would take action, that they would make a move. They would choose to cheat the right things. They would sit down and make a list, seeking out your will. That God, they'd blaze new trails that leads towards you, that leads towards a legacy, that when they're in their casket and everybody's standing around them, that the family, that the people that mean a lot to them that are standing there would talk about the good times, the memories, that camping trip, that catch, that basketball game, that dinner, that prayer time, that mission trip that they did together that was so invaluable, that can't be quantified in a moment, but that has to stand the test of the time that they have on this earth. God, help us to be people of intentionality. In your name I pray. Amen. Let's stand. Let's sing.